أمامه خطوط حمر.
Good afternoon on this Sunday, April 6th. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's headlines. The Order of Engineers elections kick off in Beirut and the north to elect council members and president. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Rai urges Speaker Nabih Berri to hold parliamentary sessions to elect a new president. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatens to take unilateral action against Palestinians if they press ahead with moves towards statehood. The Order of Engineers elections in Beirut and the north has kicked off, with thousands expected to cast a vote for 5 vacant posts in the body's council, as well as its presidency. In the northern city, 6,470 engineers are registered to vote, while there are at least 30,000 eligible in the capital. The Beirut election pits a candidate list headed by Rifat Saad, backed by the Future Movement and other March 14 parties, against Issam Bekdash, who is supported by the March 8 alliance. Competing in the north will be a list headed by Marius Baini, who is running for the top post and is backed by March 14 groups, and 2 March 8 president hopefuls, Fuad Dahir and Bassam Shaheen. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Rai has warned against tampering with the presidential elections and hopes a strong president will be elected. During his Sunday sermon, al-Rai urged Speaker Nabih Berri to hold parliamentary sessions to name the new president. He stressed that the country is in need for a strong president who can fortify the state and its institutions, defend the constitution, and put an end to corruption. The Lebanese army has arrested a number of armed Syrians in the Bekaa region of Arsal. Voice of Lebanon radio says a shootout broke out between the army and the 4 Syrians when they opened fire at an army patrol in the Wadi Humayd area. Al Jadid television says that a 5th Syrian managed to escape the scene. Investigations are underway with the assailants. Jordanian officials say bloody riots have erupted at the largest camp for Syrian refugees, leaving at least 1 refugee dead by gunshots and 30 people wounded. Police say they used tear gas to break up crowds who attacked the camp's police stations and set fire to several tents to protest against the arrest of compatriots who tried to sneak in a day earlier. And coming up next, Rwanda marks the 20th anniversary of the country's 1994 genocide. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to take unilateral action. Welcome back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to take unilateral action against Palestinians if they press ahead with moves towards statehood. Netanyahu says Israel wants peace talks, but not at any price, in his first public comments on the crisis over peace talks with the Palestinians. The U.S. brokered peace talks have veered towards collapse since Israel refused to release a fourth batch of Palestinian prisoners last weekend, as it had previously agreed as a condition of the talks. Israel and Palestinian negotiators were due to meet with U.S. envoy Martin Indyk in the first recent sign of a breakthrough in attempts to revive negotiations. Israeli warplanes have attacked several sites in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip, hours after a rocket from the Palestinian enclave hit the Jewish state. Palestinian medical and security sources say 5 sites in northern and southern Gaza have been hit, including training camps for the militant Islamic Jihad and Azadin al-Qassam brigades, Hamas's military wing. The Palestinians say there were no injuries in the attacks. The Israeli army said it retaliated to ongoing rocket attacks from Gaza, targeting 4 terror sites in the north and a 5th in the south of the coastal territory. The Australian vessel Ocean Shield has detected a separate acoustic signal in its current search location in the southern Indian Ocean and is investigating whether it is related to the missing Malaysian airliner MH370. The announcement comes as Australia said that planes and ships were also being deployed to another area where a Chinese vessel detected signals consistent with a black box beacon. Reports say it was not established whether the signal was related to the missing jet, but Australia says the signals are consistent with those of an aircraft black box. The detected pulse signals, also referred to as pings, were at least 300 nautical miles from each other. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel says the United States will deploy 2 additional destroyers equipped with missile defense systems to Japan by 2017, in a move he says is a response in part to North Korean missile launches that have alarmed the region. Tensions have been building between North Korea and its neighbors since Pyongyang, in an apparent show of defiance, fired 2 Rodong missiles on March the 26th, just as the leaders of Japan, South Korea, and the United States were sitting down to discuss containing the North Korean nuclear threat.
In response to Pyongyang's pattern of provocative and destabilizing actions, including recent missile launches in violation of UN Security Council resolutions, I can announce today that the United States is planning to forward deploy 2 additional Aegis ballistic missile defense ships to Japan by 2017. I think we are seeing some clear evidence of a lack of respect and intimidation and coercion in Europe today in what the Russians have done in Ukraine. We must be very careful, and we must be very clear, all nations of the world, that in the 21st century, this will not stand. You cannot go around the world and redefine boundaries and violate territorial integrity and sovereignty of nations by force, coercion, and intimidations, whether it's in small islands in the Pacific or large nations in Europe.
Today, Rwanda is observing the 20th anniversary of the country's 1994 genocide, which saw 800,000 killed in 100 days by the Hutu-led government and ethnic militias. The dead have been buried for 20 years, but the mental trauma left behind by Rwanda's genocide is still very much alive among the survivors.
In a church at Nyamata, south of the Rwandan capital Kigali, the possessions of the dead have been left where they were dropped. Some 5,000 Tutsis sought sanctuary in the church. Few survived. Jean Bosco Ringira hid under the benches, protected by the bodies of his neighbors and family, before escaping to the hills at night.
Sometimes I still feel human, but other times I feel crazy. When you've seen so many dead bodies, I saw about 200. I saw my wife and my father, my son and my daughter. You lose your mind and you become crazy.
Rwanda suffered one of the 20th century's most brutal genocides. 800,000 people were murdered in 3 months, many killed systematically with machetes. Before 1994, there was no word for trauma here. Mental illness was usually addressed by traditional healers. But after the massacres, counseling was needed as a matter of urgency. A national policy for mental health was established the following year. There were no psychiatrists in the country in 1994, but now there's a mental health doctor in each of the 40 or so district hospitals. Just 13 when the violence broke out, Vestine survived rape and 9 months later gave birth. 2 decades on, she still struggles to accept her daughter, but says that group therapy has helped them find peace.
They help counsel us and teach us that we can move beyond our past. I've begun to feel like I can put this behind me and change, but you move forward step by step.
Rebuilding resilience after experiencing trauma is a lengthy process. A recent study shows that even 2 decades after the genocide, a quarter of survivors exhibit symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
It was a night at that time, a kind of darkness, a deep one. But now, I think darkness didn't went totally, but we have light, and you can open the door and the window to be able to look to the future.
Rwanda has brought itself back from the brink of chaos along a path of healing. But 20 years on, invisible scars still run deep.
To mark the anniversary, Save the Children has reopened archives of Polaroid pictures used to reunite children with their families, many of whom have fled homes after the conflict. The charity has also retraced some of the children orphaned by the genocide. Hannah Matthews, who works with Save the Children in Rwanda, says children often become separated from their families during times of conflict. Trunks filled with Polaroid pictures of displaced children taken by Save the Children in the months following the war were carried from village to village to try and locate and reunite children with their families. Save the Children says an estimated 8,000 children were separated from their families at the time. And more on this issue, France says it will not take part in the 20th anniversary commemorations of the Rwanda genocide after its president, Paul Kagame, accused Paris of participating in the 1994 mass killings. Kagame denounced the direct role of Belgium and France in the political preparation for the genocide in an interview with Jeune Afrique, a Paris weekly. Kagame also accused French soldiers who took part in a military humanitarian mission in Rwanda's south of being both accomplices and actors in the bloodbath. Paris has repeatedly denied these accusations and insists that French forces were trying to protect Rwanda's civilians. And now for news around the world. In brief, Hungarians are voting in parliamentary elections, with incumbent Prime Minister Viktor Orbán projected to win. Orbán was predicted to triumph in today's elections after 4 years in office, with polls indicating that the only questions were whether Orbán can retain his 2/3 parliamentary majority and if the far-right Jobbik might beat the center-left opposition alliance into second place. Afghans have been praised for defying Taliban threats and turning out in their millions to vote in crucial elections, which the U.S. called a great achievement while pledging continued international support. More than 50% of registered voters were estimated to have turned out for local and presidential elections, which will usher the country's first democratic transfer of power. Hundreds have converged on the Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, Canada, to celebrate the International Pillow Fight Day with a giant pillow fight. They playfully fought against each other with pillows amid screams and laughter. Actor James Franco has apologized for contacting a 17-year-old British girl on Instagram. Lucy Claude from Dollar, Clackman and Shire posted pictures of the actor outside a Broadway theater. The Hollywood star sent messages to the teenager asking her age and if she had a boyfriend and where she was staying. Speaking on Live with Kelly and Michael, 35-year-old Franco says he learned his lesson.
We know you've been in the news this morning, and it's our understanding that it's something that you wanted to address. So,
well,
the floor is yours.
I just didn't, I was just feeling awkward. I didn't want to come on the show and just feel awkward. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, I'm embarrassed, and I guess I'm just a model of, how social media is tricky. It's a way people meet each other today. But what I've learned, I guess just because I'm new to it, it's like you don't know who's on the other end. You meet somebody in person and you get a feel for them, but you don't know who you're talking to. And,
right.
so I use bad judgment, and I learned my lesson. But unfortunately, in my position, I mean, I have a very good life, but not only do I have to go through the embarrassing kind of rituals of meeting someone, sometimes if I do that, then it gets, you know, published for the world. So now, you know, it's like doubly embarrassing. But
well,
anyway,
you know, I think the way you came out here and handled it is perfectly acceptable. It happens to everybody, and I think it happens to movie stars on a much grander scale, like you just said, because everybody knows who you are. And I promise I will not reveal our text messages to
thank you.
Oh yeah, don't reveal our text.
We won't reveal his.
But you know what?
I was sending some good ones.
But I always think honesty and just being and not avoiding anything is always the best policy, and we appreciate that.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top story. The Order of Engineers elections kick off in Beirut and the north to elect council members and president. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Ra'i urges Speaker Nabih Berri to hold parliamentary sessions to elect a new president. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatens to take unilateral action against Palestinians if they press ahead with moves towards statehood. Those were your Sunday headlines from us here at Future Television. Thank you all for watching us today.